Good Tuesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a great day. Plenty of Browns to talk about a little later in the show. Ashley Bastock from cleveland.com, Plain Dealer, will join us, as will Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Plenty to talk about surrounding the Browns. We begin by talking Browns and some recent updates on the Deshaun Watson suspension hearing that finished up. So per a source, this is from Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, the due date for Deshaun Watson's post-hearing briefs, that's the 5-page briefs from both the attorney representing Watson for the Players Association as well as the league, was moved back from July 11th yesterday to July 12th. So the documents are due in the hands of Sue L. Robinson today. Along those lines, we also heard yesterday that the NFL originally spoke to 12 of the Watson accusers before presenting 5 cases for the disciplinary hearing that began almost 2 weeks ago. As we hear it, according to Pro Football Talk, the decision by the league to cut from 5 to 4 may not have been voluntary. The 5th woman's claim, we're told, may have been based solely on a media report, and Judge Sue L. Robinson, we're told, may have decided not to give that claim any credence at all, essentially throwing that 5th one out of the case. So again, things pointing favorably for Deshaun Watson to get on the field some form or fashion this season. Mike Florio, who had those tweets, also talked about what to expect in Judge Sue L. Robinson's decision on the Deshaun Watson disciplinary hearing.
They need the information to come out here. They need people to understand what happened in this case. If there's going to be a punishment that falls far short of what the NFL has asked for, indefinite suspension of at least 1 year, they need people to be able to buy in, to understand, to get it. If at the end of the day, Judge Robinson decides the 4-game or a 6-game suspension. Now, the parties can work out a settlement between now and whenever she issues her decision or after she issues her decision. That's still on the table. People still are confused by that. How can this be? It happens. It happens. Anytime that you see the announcement of discipline on a player with an acknowledgement that the player is waiving his appeal rights, that is a different way of saying we've reached an agreement. We have a settlement. We've compromised. We've negotiated. That can still happen here.
And again, that's important to note. Once Sue L. Robinson comes out with her finding, assuming that she has some games suspended as a finding, Watson can negotiate a settlement so that the appeal process does not go to Roger Goodell for the final say in that. All right, Tony Rizzo from ESPN 850 Cleveland saying he has heard from reliable sources that he's hearing a 4 to 6 game suspension for Deshaun Watson. And again, those might be sources that are saying that's what they are expecting. But let's welcome in Tim Bielik, Plain Dealer, cleveland.com reporter. Tim, right now nobody knows because Sue L. Robinson is just going over the briefs, and we've heard all along that the league and the Players Association expects her to take her time going over the briefs.
Exactly, and that's what you expect from a former federal judge. She's going to go through all the information in the briefs, go through everything that's been said through the multiple days of the disciplinary hearings, and obviously be very judicious about everything that she's heard, all the evidence that's been presented to her, and as well as, the standards put forth in the NFL personal conduct policy as far as, what those say about certain standards that players have to meet or whatever. And we've seen a lot of the reports since the hearings that have been very pro Deshaun Watson in that maybe it's not going to be an indefinite full season suspension. There's the possibility maybe a little bigger than we thought that maybe there is no suspension at all, when the reality, we could be looking at maybe the 4 to 8 game range, just kind of based on the reports, and maybe that seems like the most logical place. And if that report by Tony Rizzo is true, 4 to 6 games, I think the Browns and Deshaun Watson would take that and run with it, because then all of a sudden, if that's all that's he's suspended for. He comes back in, say, week 5 or week 7, knocks the rust off in a game or two, and the Browns just certainly have the ability to go to the playoffs as long as Deshaun Watson's healthy. Obviously, the lesser suspension, the better for the Browns and for Deshaun Watson. But, we're just going to have to take our time and wait for this, because we know that based on her experience, her years behind the bench, Judge Robinson is going to work on a very detailed statement explaining everything in detail, leaning towards her decision. And I'm fascinated to know what all that's going to look like. And I mean, again, also, first time we've gone through this disciplinary process as part of the new CBA, so we have no idea what to expect. I think everybody's just throwing out guesses because we're talking about Judge Robinson being a wild card, because we don't know how this is going to go. So this could be a very telling way for how discipline gets done for the next several years.
Yeah, and again, it will be in the form of a written document. The briefs will likely be cited heavily towards the side that it airs on, be it a suspension or lack of suspension. And then there's the ability to appeal. All right. Baker Mayfield spoke for the first time as the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. Mayfield still in a quarterback open competition with Sam Darnold, P.J. Walker, according to the Panthers. He talked about having no animosity for Cleveland and what he learned from his time here.
No animosity towards Cleveland. It's a good football town that, gave me the first 4 years of my career, and thankful for those trials and tribulations, all the challenges, a lot to learn from and look back on and reflect, but just really focused on right now and being a Carolina Panther and, pumped up to do so. I think there's definitely, there was a lot of lessons and experiences that I learned from when it comes to, keeping some things in-house, but also being myself. That's why I was drafted there, was to help turn that place around and to be the best version of myself. I think it's easy to get lost in, stories and media at the same time. So it's tricky to balance, but that's the conversations, the multiple conversations that I've had with Scott and Coach Rule about, they want me to be myself, be a good leader, be a great teammate, but I've always been vocal and being able to bring guys and elevate them. So there's balance, but that competitive nature, that'll never go away. If I do that, then I shouldn't be playing anymore. So that's what's gotten me here, helped get me here, and I'll have to continue to do that.
And Tim, Baker said most of the right things today, so that is good to see. And again, I hope he does well. Everybody against the Browns.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that. I feel like that's got to be the sentiment throughout, Cleveland. I mean, there's still people I think that defend Baker Mayfield, that support him, and that maybe what happened in 2021 completely wasn't his fault in their minds. But I think, yeah, you're right about obviously Baker kind of saying the right things, but what he says about trying to be himself, keep that fire. I know he says there's no animosity. We'll kind of see how that plays out on September 11th. Because I would have to imagine, considering his personality, considering the way he plays, his energy and all those different things, I have to imagine he's going to be extra fired up for this game, just as probably some of the players on the Browns are going to be fired up, that they're going to get a shot at Baker in week 1 after everything that's kind of happened in the last 4 years. It's going to be a very, I think, emotionally charged game, and I don't think there's any way around it. I mean, we know Baker's an emotional player. Football's an emotional game. You add all those things together, along with the hype and anticipation for a new season, a quarterback being in a new city, whatever's going on with the Browns at quarterback. I mean, it's a potential powder keg of emotion for what could happen in this game, and that's what I think makes it so compelling.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, so we will continue talking Browns. On the other side of the break, we take a look at some running back tiers. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. This is from the 33rdteam.com. Those are former NFL executives who now write for the aforementioned website. They tiered the running back rooms, and Tier 1, elite running backs paired with a backup who perfectly complement their skill sets, or 2 running backs who could be an RB1. Browns top of the list: Browns, Broncos, Vikings, Packers, and Colts. Former Chargers special team coordinator Darius Swinton II, hands down, Browns are number 1, not just because of the players they have, but also the play calling of their head coach. I just don't see how they won't be elite again this year if they both stay healthy. Dearness Johnson is above average third back, and they even have a kid from UCLA who's Demetric Felton, who is multifaceted. And when you add all that together, Tim, it's hard to see how you don't play to that. That's obviously a strength, being the running back room that's playing behind a good offensive line. Use that. Use that as much as you can and in every way you can.
Of course. I mean, that's part of the reason that Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt have been together now going on 4 seasons for the Browns. And I mean, they complement each other so well. We've seen how many times each of those guys can take over a game, you know, just because they're explosive runners. We've seen Nick Chubb just absolutely run away from people and just continue to power through defenders. And Kareem Hunt, such a multifaceted running back with the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and do things with it. It's such a unique 1-2 combination. And I'm just fascinated in how it's going to be deployed once Deshaun Watson's available, because all of a sudden then you kind of have a yo-yo game. Is what do you counter against? Because when Deshaun Watson's out there, you got to worry about his arm. You got to worry about his mobility, you know, how well he throws, especially down the field, and how aggressive he is at finding receivers down the field and making big plays. Because if you're worried too much about that, then you got to worry about those 2 running backs the Browns have. And if you focus too much on those 2 guys, you got to worry about Deshaun Watson and play action. And we saw just how good the Browns have been at play action under Kevin Stefanski. So this is kind of like almost an ideal type of offensive situation for the Browns. It's just a matter of those guys staying healthy. And we've seen, you know, those guys miss some time over the last couple seasons, either with coming down with COVID or injury. So, I mean, like you said, like that one coach said, probably the best backfield when they're healthy. It's just a matter of staying healthy. That's where, you know, the 2 backfield really helps, where you're not putting so much onus on one guy to really carry the burden. It's 2 and maybe even 3 guys who are going to do that job. Yeah,
the thing that I'm most anxious to see is, do they use run-pass options, and where you put it in the hands of Chubb, and if the guys come up, he's going to pull it out and throw it to David Njoku getting behind the linebackers. And if you don't come up, Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt are going to run you over because you're going to be back on your heels.
Yeah, and also the other part of the RPO, if Deshaun Watson runs the football, then that's where the real dilemma comes from. I mean, Deshaun Watson, in a lot of ways, is the ideal quarterback for the RPO, the guy who can keep the football with it. You'd be just as dangerous running the ball as he is throwing the football, and that's the ultimate yo-yo game defenses are going to have to play. Is you can't take everything away. What are you going to let the other team? What are you going to let the Browns offense have and kind of live with it, knowing that, you know, even if you take one thing away, they might still get plays out of it because of the talent that group possesses and the potential it has. So it's just, sometimes it just comes down to the execution on those days. And that's going to be so interesting to watch is more activation of the RPO game, and something I would imagine based on, Deshaun Watson's talent and what we know about Kevin Stefanski coaching to the strength of his players, how often he's going to try to implement that, because if he uses it and they use it effectively, it's going to be pretty tough to slow down.
Yeah, it will be fun to watch and see how that develops. All right, this is from Mike Clay from ESPN. Unit grades for all of the positions for the teams. You look down near the bottom, 4 from the bottom, the Browns. And in that first column is the quarterback grade, 1.8. And you see the little red hashtag in the upper right-hand corner. Reason that's there is, Mike Clay explains, for those asking, Browns QB grade, roughly half Brissett, half Watson for now. Jacoby will be a bottom 5 starting quarterback if he fills in. That's reflective of that grade. It's important to note, Clay still projects the Browns to win 9.1 games with Jacoby Brissett starting 5 of them. And when I looked at that initially, I was like, okay, the quarterback position is the one that the Browns feel like they've upgraded significantly with Watson over what they got in 2020. But that explanation seems to make a little bit of sense.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Browns, were just a game under 500 with Baker Mayfield not playing well at all last season. We saw how just negatively impactful he was, with his shoulder injury, the interceptions he was throwing, the sacks he was, sacks that he was giving up in those situations, the batted passes, holding on the football too long, inaccuracy. And I mean, in spite of all that, the Browns were still a game under 500 last season. So you would have to imagine with a quarterback like Jacoby Brissett, where he doesn't have the talent Baker Mayfield has, but what he does have is he is much less risky. And, that kind of is both a positive and a negative. The positive is you're much less likely to turn the football over when you have a quarterback who's not going to put the ball in those dangerous situations. On the other side, you're not going to necessarily have those explosive plays that you sometimes need your quarterback to make. You sometimes need the guy to be willing to stretch the field, to be willing to test corners in one-on-one coverage and throw up a 50-50 ball every now and again. You need your quarterback to do that. And I don't know if Jacoby Brissett is going to do that. So I guess in that context, you're kind of looking at maybe, with Brissett's low risk play style combined with the talent the Browns have, maybe that is 500. And honestly, depending on what the Deshaun Watson suspension number is, whether it's somewhere between 4 to 8 games or something like that, 500 is really all you need, because when you get Deshaun Watson back and again gets a game or two to knock the rust off, we know the talent he has. I mean, 2020, he put up sensational numbers on a Texans team that was 4-12, and honestly, probably lucky to be 4-12 because Deshaun Watson was that good when the rest of the team wasn't good at all. When you get him back, all of a sudden you put him on this roster, a quarterback of his talents with the players that the Browns have, all across the team, all of a sudden it increases their margin of error for victory, and certainly a chance if he's able to go in the second half of the season or more, knock the rust off, this team's got a chance to make a run.
Let's take a look at this grading again. So we looked at the quarterback one, and when you look at it, some of the grades that are high. Now, the wide receivers, they have a 0.6, which is really, really low. So the blue ones are really, really low, and the interior defensive line is 0.1. You see the high marks, cornerbacks 3.8, offensive line 3.9, running backs 4.0. 4.0 is the highest. I'll give them the high ones I agree with. I think wide receiver being 0.6 and interior defensive line being 0.1, it's a little rough. I get it, they're unproven. But they do have young people with some talent in those areas.
Yeah, it's unproven commodities right now. I mean, defensive tackle, we have really no idea who the Browns have. I mean, it seems like the most likely guys to start, at least right now, with the ones in training camp are Jordan Elliott, who really hasn't shown much in his first 2 seasons, and David Bryant, who was a late first-round pick who didn't quite live up to that billing. And then behind them, you have Tommy Togiai, who was a 4th-round pick last year, going into his second season, and Perion Winfrey, 4th-round pick, who hasn't, has obviously not taken a single preseason or regular season snap in the NFL, so we have no idea what he is. Defensive tackle, I mean, again, complete unknowns when you're getting that position. Wide receiver, to an extent, we have an idea of what it is. We know Amari Cooper is a pretty good number one receiver. He's not an elite number one receiver, but we know he's a number one. Behind that, again, questions. We don't know how good Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be going into his third season. The expectation is that he could be a number two guy. The question is, can he continue that progression that he's shown throughout his career, going from a 6th-round pick to being a solid player in the offense a year ago, and maybe this is the year he takes that step forward. We've seen David Bell, have a tremendous start to his NFL practice, first NFL offseason. He apparently only had one drop throughout the entire offseason program, which was good to see. Anthony Schwartz, I said all along, was a 2022 and beyond guy. We'll see how he kind of continues to develop with the nuances of the game. So, you're talking one known player at that position versus a bunch of questions. Of course, it's not going to be ranked high. When you talk about analytics, that's where you're looking at known commodities. Your analytics are not about guessing. It's using known information to make informed decisions. And when you don't know what you have, then obviously you're going to err kind of on the more conservative end, the lower end, until you see those pieces that a team has, show more. That when they do more, obviously then their value becomes greater because it's a known quantity. They're like, hey, all of a sudden, guy we didn't know about has a 1,000-yard season. Maybe he's more valuable than we think. So it wouldn't surprise me, especially if Deshaun Watson plays most of the season, if that number gets bumped up throughout the season.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, Tim, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik. Make sure you read him, pages of the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. We're going to take a quick break. Other side of the break, Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. We'll talk a little bit more about Baker Mayfield. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns ownership.
Yeah, Dave, this is your boy from Las Vegas. You call in all the time. I would like to say to the Ohio people, and especially you in Cleveland, you guys ought to, how should I say this? You guys ought to appreciate the Haslams for all the trivia they went through, and they put us through. They got it right. And for him taking the flack of Deshaun Watson, yeah, Cleveland owes him a big gratitude because we're going to the Super Bowl. Not this year, for sure next. Go Browns.
All right, love the optimism with that. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, you've covered the team for, I believe we were talking about 30 years. We both go back to that era. I don't think you can question the Haslams' decision to win. I think they've always tried to win. Going through the maze to figure it out has been an interesting journey, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, they've admitted the learning curve is a little different than, a convenient gas station chain and a little more high profile. And they've kind of learned on the job since they came over. When you're minority owner, like they were with the Steelers, you don't really, the buck doesn't stop with you. It does as the majority owner. And I think they would admit they made a lot of bad decisions, but I feel like ever since they brought in Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and Paul DePodesta, they feel like those are the guys that they let make the decisions. And so far, at least the roster building, that's all I can go by is this is the best roster that I've covered in my career. And, last year I thought was the best. And then I think they even, improved it a little more. So, yeah, I think that the biggest criticism was some of the decisions and not pulling the trigger earlier on some of the coaches, maybe too soon on others, or how they listened to the wrong people and some of the decisions they made. But hopefully they got it right now. We'll see. This is the one that everybody, in the front office, coaching staff, as well as even the ownership, I think we're all on board on this Deshaun Watson. And to be honest, they're going to sink and swim with this move. If he is suspended for a year or longer and, they don't win, then they're going to be criticized heavily for taking a major swing. When you had a team that looked like they were ready to win, I kind of agree they needed to improve the quarterback if they could, but that wasn't a given they were going to be able to improve it. And if he can play this year, then they obviously improved it. But if he doesn't play, then that, I think is a step back. So, yeah, we'll see. It always comes down to what Al Davis said with the Raiders is just win, baby. And that's what they're going to be judged on, win, lose.
Yeah, and but that in and of itself is the reason that I think the Haslams were willing to take that shot on Deshaun Watson, because it is a win or lose kind of deal. The same thing with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. If you don't win, you're not going to have those jobs for very long. And if you don't have a franchise-type quarterback that you think can get you big wins, you're always looking for one.
Well, and I agree. And I think they looked around in the AFC when the Broncos get Russell Wilson, and you add that to Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. Those guys are all in the AFC, and I might even missed one or two. And you can be good, but that's not going to be good enough to get you where you want to go. You really have to have an elite quarterback, and they feel that this was the option to give them a chance to be in the hunt, for the Super Bowl.
Yep, I agree with you wholeheartedly. All right, Baker Mayfield spoke today, first time as a Carolina Panthers quarterback, battling to get that top spot. Talked about facing the Browns potentially in Week 1. Carolina and the Browns will play. Will Baker Mayfield be under center? That's still to be debated. But he talked about, the motivation of playing his former team.
Anytime you get to put the pads on, for the first time, it's live fire. It's always a great time. Obviously, it's going to be a special one. It's going to be a home game and playing against a former team. A similar situation of what I've gone through in the past when transferring from college to college. So got to handle it the best way possible. And, my job is to put our team in the best position to win. And however I can help do that, that's what I'm going to do.
And Fred, it's kind of the way he operates. You would expect him to come out and play well because that's kind of how he's motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. He would probably, come out and play better, maybe even that extra you see players step up and have big games, in those situations. The biggest difference is his supporting cast. I don't know, what his supporting cast totally is. Offensive line. I know he's got Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, and a couple other guys. But as far as on offense, he doesn't have the weapons he had here with the Browns. He is on a short time span. I think that's what motivated him to even take a pay cut in order to get the deal done, because, Sam Darnold has been there all off season and all through the mandatory mini camp. So Baker's going to have to step up quickly. There's no doubt in my mind that he's the best quarterback on that roster. It's just a matter, will they have him ready and have him start the first game? I think they would, obviously, and he's going to be very motivated to shove it in the face of the Browns. Obviously, unless Watson is not suspended, he's not going to be in that game. But I think that the Browns defense might have something to say. There's a lot of time to talk about that, but there's some guys that weren't that thrilled with Mayfield and how a lot of things went down here in the locker room. And that could be interesting. You know, they might see it as a real opportunity to go get him, you know, put the pressure on him. They practice against him every day and know what his weaknesses are and, as well as his strengths.
Yeah, it makes for a real fascinating Week 1 game with Browns and the Panthers. All right, on the Orange and Brown Report, and Fred's senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report does the Greetham angle. You've talked about position battles. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of them on the offensive side of the ball that you've written about. Number 2 wide receiver as well as the slot receiver. What do you see and how do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, those were 2 of the 5 that I've felt, you know, going into training camp to really keep an eye on. The Browns, you know, went out and got Amari Cooper. They've basically overhauled the starting wide receiver position, whatever shakes out. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, I think they overvalued what they had last year, at least the way it all went down with Landry's injury-plagued season. And Beckham, we all know how that ended up. So Amari Cooper, I think, is clear-cut number 1. The question is, you know, many thought, including myself, they maybe go get a veteran wide receiver number 2. But they feel, I believe, that Donovan Peoples-Jones is ready to take that step. We've seen, you know, spurts with him that he really played well. And I think, personally, I think he is ready to be the number 2 outside receiver. And then there's going to be a domino effect. I think he'll be in battle with Anthony Schwartz. There are a couple guys that have been around, Jamarcus Bradley, Javon Wims, they brought in from the Bears. But I think David Bell, I think he might start in the slot, and we'll talk about that, but he could also be in the mix. He can play inside and outside. So they decided to go with the younger guys, and I think they're also betting that with Deshaun Watson, he will make some of these young wide receivers even better because of the threat he has with running as well as the running backs they have. So that's what I see it coming down to, pretty much to Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz on the outside. In the slot, I think that the inside track would be David Bell. They really like him. They talked about him. He was in the slot in mini camps. I think that he's a big target and can play inside outside. So I see him maybe the inside track, but I think also Schwartz, you know, if he does not, you know, become the outside guy in place of Peoples-Jones, it's kind of mix and match. I see Schwartz and Bell kind of being the finalists in there. There is a guy, Jakeem Grant, they signed as an unrestricted free agent. He's a Pro Bowl kick returner specialist, but I do think they're going to have him in the offense. Similar to 2 years ago, they signed JoJo Natson, who is a specialist. But in training camp, the fans weren't allowed to watch it then because of COVID. But I watched. Natson was running with the first team quite a bit in those jet sweeps and specialty type plays. And I really think that Grant is going to be used in the offense in that area, you know, with those jet sweeps, especially. He's 5'6", 5'7", kind of a jitterbug, real fast guy, and I think that they're going to try to get him out in space. So I don't see him being an every down third receiver, but I think he will be in the mix. So I think Donovan Peoples-Jones will be the number 2, and I think David Bell will be the number 3 if I was to pick it right now.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will talk a little bit about Jacoby Brissett as well as the running back rankings for the NFL. They're out. We'll tell you where Nick Chubb is. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Tyler Sullivan, CBS Sports HQ, talking about how Jacoby Brissett might be the perfect quarterback for the Browns' needs as far as backing up Deshaun Watson goes.
Jacoby Brissett is kind of the perfect quarterback to be in a situation like this, because basically from the jump in his career, he's been thrust into weird situations. You go back to his rookie year in New England, Tom Brady was suspended for the first 4 games due to Deflategate. Jimmy Garoppolo was supposed to start. He gets hurt in week 2. All of a sudden, as a rookie, he's playing in the NFL. He's helping the Patriots get to a 3-1 record over the course of that Brady suspension. And then you fast forward a few years later, he's the backup when Andrew Luck decides to shock the NFL and retire, and he's starting for that whole season for Indianapolis. So he is no stranger to these quirky situations of, not expecting to be the starter, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're starting week 1 for a team in the NFL. So Jacoby Brissett has the pedigree to do that more than I think any other quarterback in the NFL. Now, if Deshaun Watson gets a year-long suspension, what the NFL is recommending there, the indefinite for the year-long suspension, well, then maybe Cleveland looks elsewhere outside of the organization. Maybe they were only looking at Jacoby Brissett as a stopgap type of guy.
And Fred Greetham, that's actually a valid point. I remembered Deflategate. I forgot he was there when Andrew Luck said, you know what, I'm not playing anymore. And it does take a special kind of mindset and pro to be able to play the quarterback position in a limited fashion like that.
Yeah, I mean, he brought up some good points there. He has done that 2 other times, and if he has to start the season, be his 3rd time, maybe 3rd time's the charm. His record, he started 37 games. He's 14-23 in those 37 starts. So he hasn't really had a great record playing with the Patriots and the Colts. Both had pretty good teams. And that's where I really don't like the chances if he's the long-term answer. I think if he can just be the bridge to get him through those first 4, 6, even 8 games and keep the team afloat, then he's done his job. As far as the offense, they've totally retooled the offense with a new set of quarterbacks. Watson, Brissett, and even Josh Dobbs all have a similar skill set, and that's a little more mobile. You might see some pistol, a little bit with the legs, and Brissett has done that with his legs as well. And so I think you might lean a little more on the running game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. But I do think that they can have some, schematics with the running game, with a running quarterback. Baker, I felt like he needed to run a little more. And when he did, it was pretty effective. It kept the defense on their toes. But I think Brissett's a little more athletic and can do that even in a controlled situation, which should make the running game even more effective. So, yeah, I really, if it's a season-long suspension, I was feeling like you needed to have a little better option than Brissett, but obviously the Browns felt that was the direction they were ready to go because they traded Mayfield before there was a decision made on Watson. So I do think that he's got some skills that can be successful, especially in the offense that I've seen him run in the offseason, at least in practice.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and I think you're right. I think the offense will look significantly different than it has past couple of years. All right, this is from ESPN.com, the continuing series that they have, coaches, executives, and players ranking the NFL's top positions. Running backs today they released. So number 1 is Derrick Henry from Tennessee. Number 2, Jonathan Taylor. And then Nick Chubb checks in at number 3 ahead of Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. Veteran AFC defensive player on what separates Chubb from the rest. Contact, balance, explosion through the line, and usually his tape gets better as the season goes on. NFL executive, quote, he was born to run the football, end quote. And, Fred, you know, I think if Nick Chubb got as many carries as Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, he'd probably be a little bit higher up on that list. I think because he does split carries with Kareem Hunt, he's going to get a couple more years of playing football as a main running back. So it's a double-edged thing. You can't argue with any of those top 4 or 5 guys. They're all among the elite in the NFL.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. You took the words out of my mouth, is that, many times he's getting 15, 16, 17 carries a game, and guys like Henry sometimes are over 30. And, I get the idea of keeping him fresh. I've actually been a little critical of Kevin Stefanski because I feel like he's used Chubb less than like Freddie Kitchens did in early. And I get the idea of being fresh, but he's one of your biggest weapons, and he's a guy that you pound into the line. He might get stopped once, he might get stopped twice, but then he goes for 50 yards and a touchdown. And I get with Kareem Hunt, you can keep him fresh, but you also have Dearness Johnson, and I'd like to see them use those running backs even a little more together to just give the opposing defense more to worry about in coming out of the backfield as pass catchers and different things like that. But no, I think Nick Chubb doesn't take a back seat to Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor. I think he's right there. He's averaged in, I think, the last 2 years, 5.5, 5.6 yards a carry. I mean, put that down. I don't care where you start from. You're going to have a touchdown within a few carries if you're averaging those type of yards a game. And I just think that he's a tremendous weapon. Browns are very, very fortunate to have him. And I just think that he's a guy that can really take over a game when you need it the most.
Yeah, I agree with you especially about getting Johnson, Hunt, Chubb, 2 of the 3 of them on the field together. You make the defense defend the entire width of the field as well. Before I let you go, I know you're working on a couple of things that'll be dropping on the Orange and Brown Report. Tell us what's coming up, what you're going to be writing, and what we can expect coming up the next couple of days.
Yeah, we dropped the 5 top offensive position battles. Some of them we talked about here last week. Tomorrow morning, or you'll see it the next little bit of time, the top 5 defensive battles. And so I won't spoil anything, but you can go to the obr.com or follow me, Twitter, and anything I post pretty much ends up there. And, that's it. We're getting ready. We have on the site right now, actually, we have Jake Burns, who does a lot with our film study, did a breakdown of the pistol and what you might see with Deshaun Watson, what he's done in the past if he gets on the field.
Yeah, Fred Greetham, as always, appreciate it. Jake Burns does a great job with the film breakdown as well. Again, appreciate the time and the insight. Fred Greetham, Orange and Brown Report. We'll have the position battles on the defensive side on the site to take a look at. Fred, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
All right, Fred Greetham again. Make sure you read him, Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead, we continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the whole Deshaun Watson situation.
Hey there, this is Aaron Harper coming all the way from Los Angeles, California, lifelong Cleveland Browns fan. Just really quickly, I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but we have not heard from one particular voice in the media for quite some time now, because it seems to me like he's ate his own words and doesn't really know what to say now, and that is none other than Rich Eisen. As I'm sure you all know, he was incredibly critical of, the Deshaun Watson case, coming out and, automatically accusing him of all of these allegations and everything, and essentially just cutting to conclusions about it before he even knew the facts. And, it happens, but it's just kind of frustrating because of someone of his magnitude to, just to cut to conclusions like that. It's just frustrating. So now to see him, he's been completely silent for the past couple of weeks now after all these things started coming out. It's just like, all right, well, there's that. So I'm just curious what you guys think of that, or if you guys have noticed that about Rich Eisen. Thank you. Go Browns.
All right, as always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock from Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Ashley, I don't think at this point anything that's really come out will change anybody who had a hardline stance one way or other, because the facts of it haven't been presented by the disciplinary officer, Sue L. Robinson. So I get kind of where you're going as far as it started with 12 at the league, it went to 5, it's down to 4. But again, nothing really has come out about what was said and what evidence was presented in those hearings.
Yeah, and I think it's important, too, to remember, it's kind of clear with what we've heard so far from this hearings that this is coming from one side, basically, right? Like the NFL side doesn't really appear to be leaking things the same way that, say, like Deshaun Watson's side might be. And there are reasons for that. But I do think it's important, you can kind of tell the difference. There is only, I think, one side that we're getting right now. We're not going to get the full picture until Sue L. Robinson ultimately makes her decision. And again, I've talked about it before. I think it's really hard to predict when she's going to do that, how exactly she's going to rule. And that's kind of by design, because she is an independent party who is looking at all of the evidence, just like she did when she was a federal judge. And that's kind of why this disciplinary system is set up the way it is. But I agree. I think people who have their minds made up one way or the other at this point, it's going to be really difficult to change them. These accusations are very complicated. These cases are very complicated, the disciplinary case, the civil cases. But I do think ultimately we haven't heard so much being talked about yet because there hasn't been a decision made yet, right? I think if conversation, especially on a national scale, has died down, maybe not locally and here in Cleveland, but on a national scale, it's going to pick back up again as soon as that decision is announced. And of course, if Sue L. Robinson issues any kind of punishment, there's the possibility for an appeals process that we'll also have to go through. So I think news is definitely going to pick up here as we get closer to training camp and the start of training camp when it comes to Deshaun Watson and what his status is going to be at the beginning of this year.
The other thing to remember about Rich Eisen, and I think he's very talented, I like him a lot, he's employed by the NFL Network. That's owned by the NFL, by the owners. So just that's nothing other than a statement of fact. Just remember where he's coming from. This was interesting. You did this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Do you think the Browns still make the trade for Deshaun Watson, where we're at right now? And I have an opinion, but I want to hear yours first.
I do. I absolutely think they do. I think they kind of always knew that there was going to be a PR storm that surrounded them because of this decision. I think they knew that there was going to be a segment of the fan base, the world at large, that was not going to be happy with them for making this decision due to the sexual misconduct allegations that Deshaun Watson's been facing for the last year plus. But I think they had their minds made up that this was what stood between them and winning a Super Bowl. They figured that once everything spills over onto the football field and this scandal is behind Deshaun Watson, that therefore it would also be behind the Browns and that people aren't going to be talking about it as much. But I think they knew at that point in time that there was going to be, kind of this uproar that surrounded them. And it's hard to say exactly, what was known at that time and to think back along the timeline of things. But I really don't think that much was going to have changed their mind in that regard. And I think they're just kind of counting on weathering the storm, even with, we had the New York Times article drop and additional civil suits. I think maybe that possibility was always lingering out there. But if you don't think, like I said on the podcast, if you don't think Deshaun Watson can win you a Super Bowl because of all this controversy surrounding him, why would you go and make that move in the first place? So if that's their rationale, it's kind of hard for me to see them changing it today.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think they make that trade like that, because for them to not understand there was going to be some sort of backlash from the fan base and public, they're too smart for that. It might be a little bit more than they thought, but you either have an elite quarterback or you're looking for one in the NFL. There's no in between. And they think they found theirs finally after, 99? They hadn't had one since 99 when they came back. So, again, this is something I know you wrote about, and take us through it. How do you think the Browns choosing Nick Harris as the starting center over J.C. Tretter, how does it impact the offensive line?
I'm really curious to see how it impacts the line overall, but I think that the Browns have kind of been set up for Nick Harris, a guy they drafted to take over that spot. And, it's ironic because, the Browns, of course, got J.C. Tretter from the Packers back in the day. And the Packers kind of have this model, right? Like they draft somebody, they groom them, and that person then takes over. So I think the Browns are kind of counting on that. We've seen Nick Harris take those first team reps. I think he's really set up to succeed, considering he has two of the best pulling guards playing alongside of him in Wyatt Teller and Joel Bitonio, two of the best guards in the league, period. He has a guy who is widely regarded across the league as one of the best offensive line coaches in Bill Callahan. So I think if Bill Callahan and Kevin Stefanski are seeing something in Nick Harris that made them think he's ready to handle this, you're kind of inclined to believe them, even with that smaller sample size. But even though it's a small sample size number-wise that we've seen from Nick Harris, the one thing I will add is that in that Packers game, the thing that I think is very promising for him is how mobile he was. Like, he's not the biggest guy, but he does have that mobility. And with how much pulling the Browns do, with how much they run the ball, I think that's going to be super important. And it's why they've kind of looked to him to step up into this role. Yeah,
and I think the comfort level that they had with him is because he was taking the number one reps when J.C. Tretter wasn't practicing for the last couple. Remember,
exactly.
J.C. So they know what they have. Ashley Bastock and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Baker Mayfield. Was he surprised at how it ended with the Browns? Plus, David Njoku, what do we expect from him? Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Baker Mayfield, his first meeting with the media as a Carolina Panther, he was asked on, was he surprised at how it all turned out, how it ended with the Browns?
I think, that's why it was surprising for everybody. Pretty unexpected, but, if I'm focused on the past, then I'm not doing my job and, being a Carolina Panther now. So like I said, I'm grateful for my time there. Shocked. I'd say it was, pretty much the only way to describe it, but you roll with the punches and you got to move forward. This is a test of adversity and how I'm going to handle it and how I can move forward and be the best teammate possible with our new home. And I'm looking forward to it.
And Ashley, Baker said a lot of the right things, which is good to hear for his side of things.
It is. And, I'm actually getting ready to publish a story as soon as I get off of here talking about Baker Mayfield kind of it seemed to me like he was the personification of that kind of maturity and like growth that you kind of expect from an introductory press conference like this. I mean, obviously multiple times last year, Baker Mayfield made it known how disillusioned he was with the Browns offense. He made the comment that he learned like maybe the value of keeping things in-house, certain things in-house. And, got to wonder if he's talking about some of that outward criticism of Kevin Stefanski's play calling that we heard last season. So I definitely think that he kind of put on that maturity sort of, aura, I guess, if you listen back to some of those answers. I think like that was very much a concerted effort. And again, it's not surprising. He's a guy who is after a fresh start right now. And I think the true test of that, as always with Baker Mayfield, is going to be what happens when he encounters some of that adversity. Does he kind of display that similar brashness that, again, sometimes that's his superpower. People love when he plays with that brashness, that moxie, and they're winning. It's when the results aren't there in the field that it becomes a problem. So I think, we're not going to really see if there's been a change in that regard until he faces some of that adversity in Carolina. But right now, as of today, when he gave this introductory press conference, I think it was everything you kind of expected to hear from Baker Mayfield as he looks for this fresh start.
Yeah, and you know what, again, hope he does well, except against the Browns. I've said that a couple of times. You also wrote about this. David Njoku, number one tight end. I have been saying for a couple of years, I look at David Njoku and I'm like, man, how does a defense deal with him? What do you, when you think of him as a number one tight end, what do you think?
I think it's certainly possible for him to play to a level that we have not seen yet. I think he's just going to get more opportunities now. Number one, as he himself gets older, he's going to be, I believe, turning 26 this week, or already turned 26, and has already played 5 years in the league. He was a young guy when the Browns drafted him, who had to contend a lot, much like Baker Mayfield, with coaching changes and obviously the Freddie Kitchens era in the early years of his career. But I really think he's settling in on a team who likes to use tight ends in their offense, with a quarterback who historically, I believe, Deshaun Watson has thrown 20% of his career touchdowns to tight ends. And I agree with my colleague Mary Kay Cabot, who's been arguing that David Njoku could be an 8 touchdown a year kind of guy. He's already improved so much with that blocking, but I just think we're talking about more scoring opportunities for him that he's really going to have the opportunity to take advantage of. And I also wrote a story about the receivers room and who the number 2 receiver is going to be. It's long become a joke now, I think, that David Njoku is going to be the Browns' number 2 receiver this year in terms of receptions. That's my prediction, and I'm going to probably stick to that until I see something else that gives me pause out on the field.
Yeah, and especially with the talents that Deshaun Watson has, assuming that he plays half the games or a portion of the games, I think Njoku could have a huge year. Before I let you go, Donovan Peoples-Jones, do you think he can be the number 2 wide receiver that the Browns need? And now we're talking about wide receivers. I think he got some unfair criticism late last year because they kind of shoved him into that number 1 role. And you were asking him to do some things that I just don't think played to his strengths.
I agree. I think Donovan has certain strengths, and those main strengths are getting contested catches. But what's so interesting about this wide receiver room, and again, probably assuming David Njoku is going to be number 2 in receptions, is the Browns kind of have the ability to pick and choose who they need based on what they need in that moment. DPJ, great at contested catches. We've been hearing about this speed from Anthony Schwartz for 2 years now, so that's another guy to keep an eye on in those situations. And David Bell, he was getting a lot of reps in the slot. I think he's going to find a home there, but don't discount him as being active on the outside. And then outside receivers on top of Njoku, you've got Harrison Bryant, who's probably going to be in a larger role this year at that number 2 tight end spot. And then Kareem Hunt, who's always kind of a safety valve in the pass game. So a lot of options for them there.
Ashley Bastock, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right, Ashley Bastock. Make sure you read her pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. See you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on Sports for CLE.